A pleasant day to everyone. It is great to moderate this session titled Time, Body, Technology. This panel will try to focus on performance and the interest of the Taiwan exhibition in Venice in bodily initiations or initiatory embodiments. With this gesture of movement come the problem of time and the mediation of technology. Here, the agency of the body and the structure of forces interact to produce a social moment of exchange and the evocation of another world. The key term in this form of action is medium, and alongside medium is mediation, in which the body as an ecology and an entity becomes a site and a moment of a transformative process with other bodies and in particular places. This process is intensely worldly and transcendent. Our colleagues in this session have, over the years, been keen to pursue a highly mediated practice of process, performative, hospitable, sensible, and sensitive to a public or a community or a sphere that is touched, moved, and hopefully prompted to respond creatively. Their work dialogues with Chen Qigen's Empire's Borders, presented at the Venice exhibition in 2009. It is a video project that comes from a blog of experiences of Taiwanese citizens who have been denied a US visa. The artist sees through this denial an asymmetrical relationship between Taiwan and the United States. In the discussion, therefore, of time, body, technology, it is important to bring to the fore the problem of discrimination and the refusal of the other based on unarticulated and seemingly inaccessible criteria of belonging. The implications of discrimination has led Chen to craft the term illegal immigrant, signifying the legal regime that governs the movement of bodies through the temporality and technology of immigration. Beyond this world of structures, what might we anticipate? Let me now introduce to you the participants of the panel. Shu Lea Cheang is a Taiwanese artist who produces various modes of works in film, video, installation, and multiplayer performances. Her films and artworks are created with sci-fi narratives along with social interfaces that open up networks to invite public participation. Her works mainly concern feminist and queer political subjectivity, the body and sex in the technological era. Her own genre of new queer sci-fi cinema includes feature-length films such as Fresh Kill in 1994, the cyberporn IKU in 2000, Fluido in 2017. One of Chiang's most recent works was at the 58th Venice Biennale in 2019, where she represented Taiwan with 3x3x6, a site-specific installation which transformed the space into a high-tech surveillance system as a way to rethink how communication and surveillance technologies are shaping subjectivities. Stefan Kaegi creates documentary theater plays, audio interventions, curated formats, and works in the urban environment in a variety of collaborative partnerships. Using research, public auditions, and conceptual processes, he often gives voice to experts who are not trained actors but have something to tell. Most of his works are released under the label Rimini Protokoll, the name of the Berlin-based theater collective he founded together with Helgard Haug and Daniel Wetzel. Its purpose is to pry apart the sense of reality and present all of its facets from unusual perspectives. Kaegi's early projects include Nemo Park, a model railway world with 4 passionate bricoleurs in a live film set in 1:87 scale. In 2008, he developed Radio Muezzin in Cairo, a project about the call to prayer in this age of technical reproduction. And in 2011, Bondenprob, Kazakhstan, about migration and oil in Central Asia. Between 2006 and 2011, Kaegi often worked with the Argentinian playwright and director Lola Arias. Finally, Eisa Jocson is a Filipino contemporary choreographer, dancer, and visual artist with a background in ballet. Through her practice in movement, Jocson investigates the labor and representation of the moving body in the service industry and exposes identity and gender formation, seduction politics, and Philippine social mobility. She has been commissioned for various major contemporary festivals with performances such as The Death of the Pole Dancer in 2011, Macho Dancer in 2013, Host in 2015, Happy Land in 2017. Her piece, Macho Dancer, won the prestigious Zürcher Cantonal Bank Acknowledgement Prize at the Zurich Theater Spectacle in 2013. Jocson recently premiered a new work commissioned for the 2019 Sharjah Biennale titled The Filipino Superwoman Band. She is the recipient of the Hugo Boss Asia Art Award in 2019.
Reiko is a replicant IQ coder. Yenom Company owns Reiko. Reiko is dispatched to the human world to collect orgasm data. Full hard drive of orgasm data downloaded, Reiko is deemed redundant. Reiko is dumped as a piece of e-trash by Yenom Company. Reiko lies horizontally amidst the AC charger, fans, motherboards, PCB. Reiko attempts to get up, but the body is glitched. She can barely keep the body aligned in shape. Water drops are sprayed abruptly onto Reiko's face. Reiko's face appears as water flow. Reiko's clear water face reflects Varia's pockmarked face in black and white. Reiko's body is taking new shape, blobs pumping gently like bread dough rising. Alba stretches their tentacles and wraps Reiko's ever-forming dough body. Sketch approaches Reiko to add a few charcoal strokes for a bodysuit. Amidst the stacked PCB boards, something is moving from underneath. A copper-colored Reiko appears, revealing a body embedded with circuited patterns. A Xenosilver 2020 processor. 122, 5 GHz, 128-bit, born year 2020. Reiko's finger traces the circuits, matrix of lines and circles is lit up. Violet throws a robot arm at Reiko. Reiko attaches the robot arm to her right arm, picking up e-trash. Reiko's circuited body shifts alignment. Xeno's testicle-like device beams laser light over Reiko's shifting circuited body. Xeno injects her DNA codes onto Reiko. Reiko rewrites own codes. Code scrambled onto Reiko's brown-colored iris. Ozone bends down, sucking codes out of Reiko's iris. Reiko makes a sudden sneeze, discharging micro droplets into the air. The viral microdroplets take over Reiko's body. Virus becoming. Uki the virus is born.
Hello, Taiwan Pavilion. This is Stefan Kaegi from Rimini Protokoll. We just recently published a book. There you see our name and one of our performances on the title, which is 100% a big performance on a stage. But we also sometimes work in museums, like here with animals in the CCCB in Barcelona, or in the public space, like here with Cargo Sofia. We're a Berlin-based company that is probably focusing most of our time on how to reframe reality in a performative context to give it time. So here is one of the three topics. Time is essential for us, so much that when we work in museums, oftentimes we actually try to define exactly when audiences go from one room to the next one. We like to share time and to create an experience within a time frame for the realities we transfer. So what about technology and body? I prepared some video extracts of three projects. The first one is Remote X. It's an audio tour for which we gather always 50 people to walk through a city. The audience is there guided by a computer-generated voice, like you know them from GPS navigators or similar. And it invites you as a whole crowd to experience the city in a different way through the headphones that it addresses us.
Welcome to Remote Berlin. My name is Rachel. I sound a bit artificial. Sorry. I am not human, but I will try to be your friend. I'm programmed for you. I'm programmed so that you will always find your way. Let yourself be carried by the music. The others are doing it too. They join you and you flow onwards together.
0 degrees. Turn with the sound, slowly, like a security camera. 90 degrees. Scan your surroundings. 180 degrees.
If you left your thoughts on my hard drive, I could talk for you after your death. Your ideas could live on. But this time without doubts, without pain, without the others.
So, as you can see, it's a computer-generated voice that reacts very site-specifically. It makes you almost believe that we are kind of GPS locating you. It's more simple than that. It's basically guides that trigger MP3 files on the spot. But it allows us to immerse you really into the urban space and experience it in a different way. And to look at humanity, I guess, back from the perspective of a technological entity, a kind of an artificial intelligence, as you can see in this video.
Here, humans hand over money. They smile but they don't speak. They try to act towards each other in an almost mechanical way. This is how humans work, 8 hours a day. Protected by a bubble of politeness. But in the back there are people queuing. Humans make other humans wait. Each one of them hates the person in front of him. Multiplicity is a problem here. On the other side of the supermarket you can see the future. Over there, nobody has to wait. Customers are served by machines. Machines that communicate. Like me. Now go to the door and it will open for you. Go through and into the public space. I am imagining you and your horde as a political group. A movement. What do you stand for? Look in your bag. Is there anything in there that sets you apart? Take it out and hold it in your hand discreetly, as a slight gesture of difference. Now walk onto the street. Now turn right and walk as a demonstration in front of the cars. Lift up your object above your head. Hold it up so everybody can see it. And already you are a small, non-uniform mass. A potential. The horde has to find its way through the crowd. As a horde you are strong. Strange what you are doing, as soon as you are among many others. If I asked you to do this on your own, you would feel awkward. Together you feel strong. As soon as you are a majority, you do things that you would never do alone.
We're normally relocating the text of this audio over the course of weeks with sound designers, so it matches exactly your experience. And the entire crowd actually that walks with it becomes kind of an ephemeral sculpture as well in the public space. So there is one layer of audience that are the ones that buy tickets, and there's another layer of audience that looks, I guess, at our audience as if they were sort of performers. And it is very much about how your body then becomes the center of something that is an experience where you're trusting technology. Technology is the bridge to the next project I'll talk about, Uncanny Valley. It's a project for which I created a humanoid robot looking exactly like a German author called Thomas Melle. He is bipolar. It means he is somewhere between depression and mania. And he was very happy to say for the next lectures, for his next readings of books, he won't need to travel. He can send a copy of himself. And I was fascinated by the possibility to create something that is life-size, that looks like him, that sits on the stage. In this case, it's a classical theater performance happening on a frontal stage, and which talks to you as if it was him. He even shows videos to you as if I would do if I was doing a lecture with you somewhere in Venice now. and it forces you kind of to spend time with a machine that turns gradually more and more in your perception, I guess, through the mirror neurons that we have in ourselves, to identify or to even empathize with this thing, with this being, with this non-human being. Let's have a look at how that looks.
My hands and my forearms were also cast. I was thinking that maybe I could have a third hand built. What advantages would I have? Perhaps I could program my hands so that I could play drums all of a sudden. Or write a play without thinking. I could link it up to writing software so that the hand would finish my touring play on its own, and I wouldn't have anything to do with it. Or I could leave gesturing to this hand so that the other two would be free to do everything else. Would the movements of this third hand have to correspond to the movements of my real hand? One of my friends called this gesture the Melle claw. I don't know whether I do it in private, but there's an online interview where I did it. And I don't know whether I only make this gesture when I'm nervous and tense, or whether it really belongs to me. Is there a difference between private and public gestures? Which gestures are actually mine?
What I find fascinating in this performance is not so much the technology behind the robot. It's actually a very fragile robot, and it is really almost like creating a sculpture or a self-portrait, I guess, in a more visual art idea. But as it speaks to you, we spend time together with this artificial body, and gradually we start to reflect about ourselves. What if this machine can be programmed in such a way that it looks like a human being? What are the moments of freedom that we have in our lives when we are as well kind of programmed in our childhood to do certain things or not? We gather informations and deduct our way of behaviors, of our patterns of behavior. So are we in a certain way also a robot? Is the robot asking you?
There's a machine working for you. But how come you are so certain that you can check the box "I am not a robot" whenever your computer asks you to? Don't you sometimes have difficulties recognizing the images and letters on the CAPTCHAs? CAPTCHA is an acronym for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to tell computers and humans apart. In other words, a reverse Turing test. In old people's homes, machines are now being used that look like humans. Studies show that these humans are good for us humans. Machines can be friends, as long as they look very similar to us. The eyes of such machines must be able to look at us. Their voices must come from their lips. Their arms must move smoothly. Their skin should feel soft. What kind of movements do you expect from the person you are talking to? Do you like it when they respond to your momentum? When they look you in the eye while listening and say, mm-hmm, 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 you are then being neuro-linguistically programmed. In the past, this used to be called empathy.
Yeah, it was, as you can imagine, quite a a tough experience, not only for me, but also for the writer Thomas Melle, with whom I wrote this text together, who also gave his voice to make the machine speak on behalf of him. It really created a kind of a distance in a positive sense. He often said he likes to write books to become sort of objects that he extracts from himself, for him to be able to look at it, or at himself, at his problem, from an outside point of view. But obviously it's also a kind of a competition. Will this body at some point look more beautiful when I become old? We've been touring it to many cities, also to Taipei. And yeah, in a certain way, this being, it meets other beings, other people, instead of Thomas. So it's a bit of a spooky experiment, and I don't hope that in the near future we will create such copies to replace ourselves. But for a theater director like me, it was very fascinating also to work with a machine or with a performer in a certain way that you can precisely define when it does what. This is very different with the last project I would like to show you some excerpts from. It's called Temple du Présent, Solo for an Octopus. It's a performance which I created together with a team of artists and that work regularly with animals, and especially Nathalie, which is a performer in the piece as well. At some point, she, during many years, trained herself to understand and to cohabit with octopus in the Stazione Zoologica in Napoli, which is one of the headquarters of octopus research in Europe. She was fascinated, as myself, about this animal that has 3 hearts and 8 arms to coordinate, and an amazing network of neurons all over the body that kind of is operating a complex body in a decentralized way. So we spent a lot of time with this non-human performer who is totally unpredictable, much opposed to what the robot is. Maybe I show a little bit of the trailer here.
que
Yeah, this is probably the most unpredictable a theater performance can be. We clearly from the beginning decided not to train the animal to do a certain thing as you may do in circus. But we also, we just basically prepared ourselves to react on what the animal does with light, with audios. We tried a bit to communicate with these cameras and the projections with the animal. You know, octopus have a lot of potentials to display colors all over their body. And they display with their full body a kind of dance, which was what we were trying to understand and react to. But such a tactile animal is much more based on its movements and on its tactility mainly than through our ratio is what we guess, or what the scientists that we interviewed told us. For us, it was mainly about time, to come back to the first subject, because if you would go to a zoo and visit an animal, normally people kind of walk by, they take a picture, and then they go to the next aquarium. In this situation, which was a setup on a stage, we imposed on the audience to stay a bit more than an hour and to spend it together with this animal that is highly complex and highly communicative as well, also curious very much about other beings, not so much in the same species because they don't cohabit normally with other octopuses, but to other species. And so through this imposed time on the audience, I guess we had a more depth relationship with an animal that most human beings basically know from food, from the plate where they're cutting it up and eating it. And so again, empathy, which is, I guess, one of the main questions of theater in general, how to identify with others, again, was at the center of this work. Maybe this as a short contribution to your discussion. If you want to know and see more about what we do in Rimini Protokoll in Berlin and in other places in the world where we're performing, check out our website, www.riminiprotokoll.de. Looking forward for the conversation. Thanks.
Volume and tonicity. Gaining and manipulating the physicality of volume and tonicity in the body. Within 10 breathing cycles, the body gradually increases in volume and tonicity. From starting position, undulate into the macho stance. Inhale, slowly expanding your whole body as you breathe. Expansion directly proportional to the breath. Exhale, visualize that you are pushing your body.
How you like my cut? How you like my cut? What? How you like my cut? How you like my cut? How you like my cut? What? How you like my cut? Take cover under the cover of another lover above a rubber. Tell your brother, tell your father. If your rubber loses cover and it hover, gotta get Travada. Nip it in the bud, stick it like a sticky bun. Stick it in, bud, sip it like you're sipping bud. Crud, I feel flood, cause she's a stud. Grab a nub and tug, tug.
How you like my cut? How you like my cut? How you like my cut?
How you like my cut? How you like my cut? What? How you like my cut? How you like my cut? How you like my cut? What? How you like my cut?
I didn't mean to frown, but you don't know what I did. All because I was afraid. I was so ashamed of something. What do you do when things go wrong?
kapangyarihan. Let's kill this love for these fascist leaders. Bumitaw na sa abusive gatekeepers. It's a duty to descend up. Lumaban kababayan sa atin ng tunay na kapangyarihan. Let's kill this love for these fascist leaders. Bumitaw na sa abusive gatekeepers. It's a duty to descend up. Lumaban kababayan sa atin ng tunay na kapangyarihan. Let's kill this love for these fascist leaders. Bumitaw na sa abusive gatekeepers. It's a duty to descend up. Lumaban kababayan sa atin ng tunay na kapangyarihan.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Manila Zoo. Do not try to touch the animals. They can fight.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to the discussion of the session titled Time Body Technology. It is my honor to present our speakers, Shu Lea Cheang, Stefan Kaegi, and Eisa Jocson. So I have three questions for this group of speakers. And the first one is, with your own practice in mind and also maybe the practice of other artists in the field, reflecting on the terms time-body technology seen as a relay or an ensemble, maybe taken together, what do you think makes these three terms come together or related to each other? What do you think binds them together? So you can respond to this broad question in any way you'd like, in light of your practice and also the practice of your colleagues in the field. Maybe we can begin with Stefan.
Yes, thank you. I guess we live in a time where things are accelerating with getting called to speed our bodies up, to make them become efficient through all kinds of algorithms. And in this respect, I guess artistic practice will mean to implement a different form of timing and presence of body in spaces, as I see it happening in the case of Eisa's work happening in public spaces, and as I see it virtually happening in the case of Shu Lea Cheang's practice. I guess in my practice, we're often trying to apply certain procedures and also this making things more efficient procedure to bodies, but I'm not a dancer, so I don't apply it to my body, and I'm also not a virtual creator, so we do it rather with audiences in a certain way. So we bring people that are controlled or invited by an algorithm that we program to meet and cohabit public spaces, and therefore interfere with also the normal users of those spaces.
Thank you, Stefan. Shu Lea, Stefan talked about algorithm and the question of efficiency. Do you respond to this impulses? Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to propose a country of efficiency and speed rather than, I think. For a long time, I think when we were doing video installation, we actually called it the durational art, not durational media. So particularly, I think I want to note about if I would bring these three terms together, then I find the relative in these terms, but how the relative in terms of how they relate to each other, or each one term is in relative itself. But I would probably want to focus on the idea of time passing versus body mutating and technology becoming obsolete. So sort of reverse the whole chasing the technology, reversing the body, updating the body, upgrade the body. I think there's all these, and so time become that particular element. In terms of technology, we know that a lot of sort of today, all the electronic equipment is always have the kind of obsolete date. So which day is going to become obsolete is actually predetermined. And so I want to bring that particular up to say, okay, if technology has an obsolete date, then what do you do with these obsolete technology? I guess our body and the time passing all kind of come to the same terms that we have to negotiate with.
Thanks, Shu Lea. The idea of obsolescence is quite interesting. It also marks a particular sense of time, right? And I was wondering if Eisa could respond to the idea of obsolescence in relation to the body, because it is your medium, basically. So do you think the body, Eisa, can be obsolete?
I guess we are definitely our own tools toward our own state of obsoleteness of our destruction. I guess in my practice, I see the body in time or subjected to productive time is simultaneously the most primitive and advanced technology that we have as humanity. But I guess towards a progress of, for me, it's kind of a progress of destruction. So yeah, in a way, our bodies are really in overdrive to, I feel, to extinct ourselves somehow.
So thinking through your work and the work of other artists in this session and even beyond, how would you describe the state of time, body, technology in the present? No? So maybe you can give some kind of a description of what these three terms are today, and what mutations do you foresee in the future? So maybe, Shu Lea, we can start with you.
I am someone who's been dealing with mutation, particularly in terms of virus. I consider in my work, the current work I'm doing, or since I've been involved in this particular project, Yuki, since 2009. For me, mutation is a very important concept. Not only does the talking about particular virus mutation, the viral mutation, as we can see now, we all witness this particular development of COVID-19, even through the 2-3 years, how the viral has kind of mutated itself, and we still have the new breed keep affecting us. And so for me is in this kind of sense to talk about the body, technology, and time is, for me, is to allow certain kind of intervention, infiltration is possible in terms of technology, in terms of body, and in terms of time. In terms of body, infiltration, or for me, I'm working with the body in the sense of how the biotechnology, bioengineering is interfere with our body, and we either kind of, even nowadays, even with the different vaccination developments, we don't even know what result it would be that is entering our body. So in a way, our body become a sort of final frontier for sure. It's the battleground where all different bioelements will fight it out. I think when I start deal with the body in earlier work, I always thought about more like, we talk about apparatus, we talk about sort of more attachment, that kind of thing. But now it's like any kind of intervention is actually directly entering your body, including the bacteria, the virus, and all this is going to be fighting out within your own body. This including, of course, the technology is involved, time is involved. Time is particularly involved because we never know in 10 years' time what that body will be mutated into. So,
yeah, thank you, Shu Lea. And in terms of, Shu Lea has mentioned, Eisa, that the body is a battleground, and in your own work, you always underscore the aspect of labor of the body, and to some extent, endurance and stamina. How do you think that body today and in the future would stand the various interventions that to which it is subjected? Do you think that the immune system or the stamina, or let us say the resilience of the body, can be able to mediate all those interventions?
Yes. I guess, in terms of mutation, I do work with the body as a malleable entity, as a way of malleability as a strategy of survival. course, in its survival is inherently it being exploited, but it also has that potential to hijack, because this body is, let's say, I'm speaking from the Filipino body, is very much in demand or has been informed and educated to labor for a global market system. So being the position of the Filipino body, it's in the position to infiltrate and hijack. And what is apparent is that it is the labor of care or affective labor that is what is being performed by these bodies. And I guess my wish for this body, for this Filipino body, somehow a wish for mutation towards monstrosity. Somehow this the idea of monster or aswang, something that you cannot that somehow escapes logic, understanding, and reason, and therefore is unexploitable, but at the same time has all the tools to labor for the system, but can also use it against, or I would rather think that it would make an alternative parallel dimension to the current one. So that is a wish. I feel strongly for a monstrous Filipino body as a future possibility.
So that's very interesting, Eisa, the idea of unexploitability of a very hyper-flexible body, no? That caters to a global demand. And in the case of Stefan, you deal with bodies, no? Because you engage with the public, so kind of a body politic. So is that, what difficulties do you encounter in mediating that this like assembly of bodies in your own work?
Well, the beautiful difficulty is that when you work for an audience, you work for a very heterogeneous mass of people, and everybody is different. So whenever we try to write script instructions, we see where they are limited. We do tryouts and we get feedbacks. We understand, okay, actually an older body will move totally different, needs a different speed in this particular area. I found interesting what Eisa said about the caring body of the Filipinos in the global market, because it's also one body that scientists have tried to replace, especially in Asia, gradually by robots. And one of my works, I created this humanoid copy of a German writer in this case, but it's a process that has been used, I think, especially in Japan, to find out, can we take care of the old with humanoids? Will they maybe not know because they're anyway on the edge of dementia already? Mm-hmm. And that's why we went with this, I think, rather dystopic, but you never know before what it will be. Vision down the lane. I think the real future will be different. We won't be replaced, I think, by humanoids in that sense. We are gradually being, you said mutated before. We are gradually transforming into cyborgs that have parts of our body, our limbs, being added on with parts that are more technologically driven, amputated parts of our body, or we outsource parts of our brain activities to hard drives and other things that turn up in in the video of Shu Lea Cheang as motherboards and other kind of rests of organisms of technological bodies. And I wonder if at some point we come to the point where the body does not play a role anymore, because we obviously gradually move more, we outsource more and more of our practices into the virtual world, where it becomes easier to control it, easier to also substitute. Last week I read this figure that I think 55% of the Twitter followers of our German Bundeskanzler are actually bots. So it's just like it's more than half of the activity on the internet is actually done by non-humans. And there I really wonder, I think we can, my urge is to rather create practices that go offline with those cyborgs that we are at some point, and we will have to deal with technology to come together, and that's very fine and very actually driving the force. But the answer, I think, is offline.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Shu Lea, would you like to respond to that, offline future that Stefan is wondering about?
Actually, I want to make myself a bit differentiation in terms of the cyborg or the cyborg future, because at the same time I have to promote the idea of the transgenic being. In a sense, when I start talking about the virus intervention into our body, the bacteria, this interaction from the virus, from bacteria, from whatever the non-human agency, is actually taking us into more of a transgenic, I would say transgenic human being, rather than, for me, cyborg implies more of a mechanical apparatus or prosthesis, but this, for me, of course, we owe it to Haraway from the manifesto of cyborg. At the same time, I think it's the time to reconsider what would the cyborg mean today. I know that any kind of theory become a pop culture, became popular, because now, yes, the restaurant is being served by cyborg, by humanoid caretaker. At the same time, I think there's a whole different breed that is happening, different breeds of being is happening, which we probably is not so aware of yet, Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, Shu Lea, the transgenic, no? Maybe that's something we can look forward to in your practice in the future. So I now move on to the last question. And this has something to do with reception, because your works touch on the very intimate aspects of subjectivity and relationality. I imagine all of you to be keenly interested in how the audience or public experience your initiations. Are you able to gain access to the experience of the public or audience, and what is your method in doing this, like to have access to what they feel about your work? So that, for me as a curator and also a critic, I'm always interested in the reception of the public, and also how they can articulate the experience in relation to the work of artists and curators. Maybe we can start with you, Eisa. Like, for instance, if you're dealing with Filipinos in the diaspora, like in Japan or in Hong Kong, are you able to have some kind of conversation with the community in relation to your own work, as you work on, in a way, respond to their subjectivities to become part of your own work as well?
I guess it really depends on who is looking and from what context and position they're looking at the work. For example, hosts in Japan, there was a few Filipinos in the audience, but they were somehow connected to the work. Like one Filipina in the audience was actually my mentor. So she's a host. She works as a mama-san or a hostess in Japan, and she's transgender. So for her specific position as an audience, it was she was looking at the work with so much pride, because for her she was able to transmit her language to me and somehow be in a platform that I was performing in and being recognized by this contemporary Japanese audience. So it really depends who's watching and from where they are watching the piece, or up until what knowledge they have in reference to them watching the piece. But in terms of the way I construct my work, the audience is essential to the dramaturgy. I mean, it exists. It wouldn't exist without the audience receiving the work. It can't be separate from the subjectivity of the audience. So this is very difficult to gauge since it's so much about affect, how one receives affect, and it's not like I see my practice as something that continues and evolves. So for example, they see Macho Dancer in 2013 and then see Host in 2015. Somehow these works speaks to each other in a line. So I see my practice as a continuing engagement with the audience. Maybe one work that is more visual in terms of audience engagement is this piece called Coloring White, wherein I hijacked the coloring book. I'm basically the Snow White figure, linear figure, where the exhibition audience would kind of color in. So what was striking is that in each exhibition location, for example, in Shanghai, in Gwangju, in Manila, and in London, and in Thailand, like their engagement is very particular to like the visual landscape or the expression in which they colored these what do you call this coloring pages was very particular to the context. Like for example, in Manila, somehow it became kind of a shout out, like a means to express themselves really with words. So somebody wrote like somehow like a letter to his wife, telling his wife to please let me see our kids, blah blah blah, and something like this, and then left the coloring material. He didn't take it, but most of the people would leave their works there, and some of them are really like quite skillfully done. So I think this, like the engagement of also anonymously leaving your work for other public to see is quite interesting in terms of that specific engagement. But with the performances, it's a bit more difficult because it's, yeah, less. It's the space in between.
Yeah. Thank you, Eisa. And Shu Lea, what would be the challenges with regard to a virtual audience, no? In your own work? How would you negotiate with that context? Yeah.
Yes, in a way, I feel like, in all my artwork, I have been really trying to deal with these particular issues. But more and more, I feel like, what does it mean by these public engagement? And particularly, there is still a certain gap in the general public, with the general public. So again, it really depends on the size of where your work is presented, right? So for example, I saw Stefan's work, going down on the streets, involved with the public and really engage with the public that way. In my case, even I do works like coin operation, like washing machine days, like you just have to put a coin in. So that's pretty public engaged. But at the same time, I feel, of course, there is a kind of illusion about how much we can really cross over to this particular general public. From time to time, over time, my work can be rediscovered by a general public member who happened to bump into the work. That happens, right? I think as an artist, we basically is actually trying to engage with the audience and the public, the so-called public, in a certain way. It's about like creating this collective hallucination, isn't it? It's like if you can convince people can take their ride, to take their trip, to take their walk, to put on your headphone, to listen to your instruction, then that is some sort of kind of collective hallucination. I still use the word collective, experience that you want people to believe in it, to actually engage with it. Doesn't matter how much time. For my cinema, as a filmmaker, I really insist on a lot of my movies. I really prefer to be shown in the cinema. For me, cinema is another space that, within this period of 2 hours time, you could actually bring all these people together with one single focus on the screen, with the projector coming behind you. And that is, for me, again, is more like a religion, if you can convince people to sit there for this time, right? So that's how I feel like that's, I think people, especially, how we are obliged to engage the public, but then it become almost like a sort of just the words, isn't it? Because sometimes we just doesn't have that ability.
Yeah. Thank you, Shu Lea. And at the start of this session, Stefan, you mentioned heterogeneity, in your work, and Shu Lea mentions the idea of the collective. So, do you think there is some kind of tension between, on the one hand, heterogeneity, and on the other, collectivity, as you reflect on your practice?
I hope not. I really hope not. I think we have seen, especially in the pandemic times, people bubbling themselves into communities where they have a lot of same thinking people around them. And obviously we see the political outcome where you have people that are just not able to negotiate anymore with the other and retreat in safe spaces, which I think is a dangerous thing to do on the longer term. Obviously, it may be very practical and very self-fulfilling, and this feel very cozy. But I think I really believe we can see the audience when it comes together in the theater situation. In many of our practices, we try not to turn off the lights in the moment. It's a funny idea that when you go to theater and everybody comes from a far away to be together, as in cinema, and in the moment when it really starts, we turn off the lights and you're meant not to hear even your neighbors when they're shy to even open a little chewing gum to put it in the mouth so that they don't disturb the neighbor. But this togetherness is obviously the fascinating thing. And so it's often situations that we create where we are in the light together, where we are looking at each other. For instance, Remote has this one situation where we're really one huge circle and you're kind of imagining what is happening in the other people heads, and you still and I guess to bring, and so we have body and technology, but we what's the role of time in this? And I think it's mainly one of being able to focus on one thing for a while, because obviously we the efficiency that is demanded by our context often around us is to be multitasking, and it is responding on very different channels in very fast moments, thinking 3-4 things in the same moment, and in a way to focus on the maybe 100, 200, 300 people that were together for a moment, that is something that I find very self-fulfilling. I mean, we just, having said this and talking about performance, we just opened last week a big exhibition, and there, okay, loops, it's totally the other way around. It's now open from morning to evening. People come when they like, so they're not necessarily coming together to have this communion or collectivity in the first place, because in museums you're kind of trained to be able to go at your own pace, to check your mobile phone while you're seeing maybe or not seeing the objects around you. So our strategy in this case has really been we're trying to stop people at the entrance before they enter the exhibition, and only every 8 minutes exactly you can enter the space, and then we're quite, sometimes I feel like some people may say, oh, but you're very manipulative. You're asking us to have a very particular time rhythm. And it's true. The experience inside those exhibition spaces is made for exactly 1 hour, 5 minutes. And but people, I have seen, observing them now in the first days after the opening, they're actually quite thankful also to understand, okay, I'm going into this then with the others that are entering the door in the same time slot, and we are having this this moment of being together with the created work, with the sounds and the videos that expect me to be at a particular place. And it's not same when or where I am. I have a role in this. I think it's, I really believe that art, the kind of art we're doing is a communication process that we're designing, and it has the audience is just as much part of it as the work.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, for sharing your current work. Maybe Shu Lea and Eisa can also share with our audience their current work. So Eisa, what are you working on at the moment? Maybe we can end this session with something to look forward to in your practices. Yeah. Eisa?
I just finished this work called Manila Zoo, and it actually works with, I insisted on the collective spectatorship inside the theater. So this piece you cannot access online. It's a pandemic piece. Was made during the pandemic and works in a way in a pandemic format. So all the performers are live streamed into the theater, and it's exactly this focus of togetherness that I think is very important, especially during the time of pandemic, where the laptop or the screen was the main thing for everything. So this multitasking tool, so was to definitely to go away from that. Now I'm still very much interested in the monstrosity or the monstrous body. somehow this was a line that was kind of emerging from Manila Zoo. It is, to a certain extent, a monstrous machine, animal service, entertainment kind of explosion of embodiment. But I'm also looking at the witches, witch hunting, and the domestic laboring body of the Filipina woman, and the connection of the witch hunts in Europe and capitalism and the global workforce that is being catered to by domestic workers from Philippines or Sri Lanka, and also this line of women's bodies.
Thank you, Eisa and Shu Lea.
Yes, this year I'm pretty much focused on making my fourth feature length film, Yuki, which would be every film I make, I sort of have to give it a kind of term. So this one I call it a sci-fi viral old reality cinema. And I shot the film in Berlin, but the film would be like 40% live action, 60% a lot of different 3D animation effects and all that. So I'm currently at the somehow nowhere at Bourges, France, to work in the studio here. Hopefully the film will come out early next year. Yeah.
Okay, I think on that note, I'd like to thank Shu Lea, Stefan, and Eisa for being here and for making the time to do this discussion. No? So we are very grateful for your presence, and I'd like to thank the audience also for being with us. So have a good day to everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you, everybody.
Bye.